It's the Hero Show. Welcome to the Hero Show, everybody, where every week we look for inspiration from great men and great women to be the heroes of our own lives. And you are with your hosts. I am Andrew Bernstein, and you are Robert Begley. How we doing today, Robert?
Doing great, Annie. Andy. Happy to talk today about an Annie. I consider you a great educator, and today we're going to talk about an incredible educator who is linked to Helen Keller closely, more closely than anybody else. And this story is about perseverance in becoming a teacher and a mentor.
The story of Annie Sullivan and the way she was able to educate Helen Keller is a jaw-dropping story. You can't make this stuff up. You wouldn't believe it, if it wasn't actually real. So let's go right into it. Robert, was we're 1887 in the illustrious state of Alabama, right, where poor Helen Keller is, I don't know, she's 7 or 8 years old, afflicted with
7 years
childhood
old.
disease. Yeah,
Yeah.
afflicted with childhood disease, so she is blind and deaf, right? Obviously mute,
And uncontrollable. There's no
right?
discipline in her life. The family treats her. They try to discipline her. It doesn't work. They coddle her. That doesn't work. And she's just like half human and half monster. And sadly,
Yeah,
they don't know what to do until they find this woman named Anne Sullivan, who's up in Lowell, Massachusetts, and they hire her, who had been blind herself or blinded, had terrible vision her whole life, comes down to Alabama, meets the family, and brings her strict discipline ways
right,
to try to
right.
turn Helen Keller into more human.
You're absolutely right, Robin. Everybody, I think, should watch the movie, the Miracle Worker,
Yes,
right? William Gibson. Correct
yes,
me if I'm wrong, Robin. William Gibson, the author of the play, and I think the screenplay
yeah,
of the movie, based the
both.
story on Annie Sullivan's own account, right, of
Yes.
her teaching.
Hmm.
Yes, and so it's an amazing story. Helen Keller. Yes, I mean the kid has so much vitality. She's just this robust, physical specimen. She's really smart, but she can't see, she can't hear. She has very touch is her only sensory contact with the outer world. So she doesn't have words, to think, and she's unbelievably frustrated. And you see the battles that go on. And although you're right, Robert, she's like an undisciplined. She's like half a wild, not just an animal, but like a wild, tameless animal. And she's got to be disciplined, and yet your heart breaks for her.
Yes.
She's got all these great qualities, but she's so frustrated as she can't communicate. It's just it's anyway. Annie, Helen Keller's tough. Annie Sullivan even tougher, and
Yes.
oh man, what a battle of wills and physical contest between these two. And
Yeah.
the miracle worker really captures it. So the first thing, you're right, she's got to be disciplined. She's got to be disciplined
Right.
before she can be taught.
And if we just talk about a couple of scenes from the film, the first day Annie Sullivan's there, the family's eating around the dinner table, and Helen Keller just walks to each person. There's like five of them around the table, and just puts her hand in, takes food, and there's a conversation going on as if she doesn't exist. The family is just letting her do whatever she wants. Then she goes to Annie Sullivan's plate and she smacks her hand. And, and the family's like outraged. What are you doing? And she's like, she needs to learn discipline. The two of them are just physically abusing each other. Keller eventually knocks out a front tooth. And she decides, after a little bit of time, Sullivan decides she can't discipline this child in this house. So she has to take her away. And what they do is they trick Helen into thinking she was on a carriage ride for like 2 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let me
go ahead.
jump in here for a second before we get to that, because in the miracle worker, everybody, you got to see this. I mean, the
Yes.
scene in the dining room, there's this physical battle between Annie Sullivan
Yeah.
and the wild Helen Keller. I mean, it's like a
Hmm.
world war. It's unbelievable. The scene goes on and on. Helen smacks Annie. Annie's not. She smacks her right back. She's spitting food in her face. They're wrestling on the floor, but after this long battle, she go. They're both exhausted by the end of it. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it on a movie screen. This
Yeah.
battle between these, this young girl and a young woman, and he's only like 20 years old. It's like a
Yep.
world
20.
war, and yeah, she goes out to the family, and she says to them, "The room is a shambles." Something like, "The room is a shambles," but Helen's napkin is folded. Oh my God, but it's an unbelievable scene. It's an unbelievable scene. If the movie was playing in the movie theater for $10 or $12, that scene would be worth the price of admission all by itself.
Yes. Yes.
So Andy makes a decision. You were saying,
Yeah, and he makes a decision against the family's wishes because they don't want their daughter taken away, but they also want her to become more human, learning ideas and learning about the world. And Andy can only do that by taking her away. Fortunately, they have like a cottage, not that far, maybe like 200 yards or something away from the house. But what Andy decides is let's take her on a carriage ride for about 2 hours so that Helen thinks they are really far away and she gets that discipline. And Helen loves to learn. She starts, with her palm. She takes the palm and shakes up and down whenever the answer is yes. And little by little, she's teaching her words through sign language and then connecting the word with whether it's a doll. That's the first thing, DOLL. And then she goes to cake and then she goes to milk. All the things a 7-year-old wants in life, Andy. So, um, but it reaches a point where there's some growth. And then, as we know in anything in life that we're trying to succeed at, it's not always straight up. It's up and then back, up 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. And this continues on throughout the saga.
right? But let me say something here.
Yeah.
Before they even get to the cottage, the father, Helen's father, understand. Helen at this point, after that world war in the dining room, she's
Yeah.
terrified of Annie.
Hmm.
Everybody coddles her. Annie smacks her when she smacks her first. She's terrified, and the father
Hmm.
says, "How are you going to teach her when the child is terrified of you? She won't. She runs. Whenever she feels." Annie's presence. And Annie says, "Well, I'm gonna have to. First thing I'm gonna, do is I'm gonna have to teach her to tolerate me, and I can't do that here."
That's
And
right.
they go to the cottage.
That's right. I can't do that here with all of you
Right.
around. Yeah. Yeah. You can't have that. th- You can't. Yeah, okay. So here's a life lesson, Andy. You cannot allow people to indulge their every desire. And that's what the family did. They allowed Helen to indulge in every desire. There was no discipline until Anne Sullivan came in. And now this goes over the course of several
And
years.
they give her 2 weeks alone with
Yeah,
Helen
they
in
give
the
it two
cottage.
weeks in
Right.
the film. Yes, to make incredible progress, and it's right on the border of them just kicking her out, sending Sullivan back up to Massachusetts. But no, she makes that little breakthrough. Okay, she makes a small breakthrough, and the family decides to let her stay. And if we just go, Andy, right to, over the course, we see the struggle back and forth to understand, make this connection again between words and the real world.
Right.
And there's the
Right.
final battle
Yeah.
in the last 5 minutes of the film.
Yeah, it's amazing. But first, I just want to say Annie Sullivan is relentless. I mean, she's spelling to Helen constantly. She touches,
Yes.
wood. She's spelling, by the hand signals, WOOD. Trying, everything she touches.
Yeah.
Annie's spelling the word into her hand, trying to communicate to her that these things have wood or cake, like you said, or doll or
Doll.
mother.
Hmm.
All of these things have names, and the names can be spelled by hand signals. And then once she learns that there are words, and that and that she could learn the words and learn the sign language, then she could communicate. It opens up the world of ideas and
Yes.
knowledge and communication to Helen. But what a struggle to get to teach the blind and deaf and mute child who's been that way since infancy, the the concept of language. That there
Yes.
are words, that are names for things. So
Yeah.
so she makes progress in those 2 weeks, but Helen still doesn't understand. She doesn't get the concept of language yet. She's
No.
much more disciplined. She's much more presentable. And the father says to her, "You've done wonders." He's all on Annie Sullivan's side now, and Annie says to him, "Obedience without understanding is a type of blindness in itself. All she does now is obey me. She still doesn't understand." And that final scene.
Yeah, we talk about obedience versus understanding. I mean,
Right.
that is a crucial part of learning and becoming independent. And yeah, so we get to the final scene, and Sullivan she literally
Yeah, we
drags
should we should say that back at
Helen.
the home, and Helen immediately starts to test the family, and she starts throwing stuff
Yes,
around. She's reverting
yes,
back to her animal state, and the
yes.
and the family's, "Oh, let her be. It's her welcome home party, and it's a special day." Somebody says, and Annie says, "It's a special day when I tolerate that kind of behavior." That's when she drags her out to the water pump,
Drags her to the
because Helen
water
took the
pump, which
yeah,
we've
Helen
seen
took the
many
pitcher of
times
water and threw it.
before.
She took the pitcher. Helen took the pitcher of water, threw it in her face. Right?
That's yeah. So water is so important in this film, and she's pumping the water with all her might, and she's like, "What water?" And then Andy goes, she feels the water. Helen Keller feels it running over her hands, and it just comes out water. And the scene actually, the connection between the two.
Yeah. No, her mother had said earlier in the story that when Helen was like 6 months old, she was so smart. She was grasping for words. She was saying, "Wow, wow, wow." She was starting to speak, and here, yeah, she gets it right. She gets it.
First, she gets water, then it's ground, then she feels the ground, then she runs and feels the bell, and Sullivan's calling the parents, come out, look at this. And then finally, it's like mama, papa together, and the three of them are embracing the mother, father, and Helen. And then you see Annie Sullivan on the side, knowing her work is done until Helen Keller just feels blindly, and teacher, just that word teacher. I can't watch that without crying, Andy. I mean, it is just it's a perfect way to end a film on education.
Absolutely. We watched it last night. I was sobbing all through the film, especially
Yeah,
at the end. When the water's, like you said, Robert, the water's coming out of the pump, and Annie, relentless, spelling it into her hand,
yes,
Water, and the light bulb goes off. This is not just a hand game. These signals mean words, and words are the names of things. And now I can
yes,
understand, I communicate. And the frustration level now, of course,
yeah,
begins to diminish. Now she could communicate with her mother, who loves her and is very tender with her. You can see she loves her, but now she could communicate with her mother and with her father and with her teacher, who she now has come to respect and I would say love. She's come to love Annie Sullivan.
and it would go on, Andy, for 50 years. The two of them would be together. But if we look at why the hero, why is Annie Sullivan the hero? Persistence and perseverance, despite all the adversity in this little savage quote girl, who was like half human and half monster, but she gave her the discipline to connect words to reality, to things in reality, which become a form of communication that Keller went on the rest of her life. So I think that's the life lesson here for us, Andy, is to persevere.
Yeah, absolutely. Perseverance. Annie Sullivan is relentless, and
Yeah,
always spelling, always trying to reach her with the concept of language. And Helen, half human, half wild animal, I think is more appropriate than she's not quite a monster, but half wild animal. But yeah, Annie Sullivan teaches. She's a miracle worker. She does the
yes,
what everybody thought that Helen Keller couldn't even be disciplined, never mind educated. And Helen
yeah,
Keller went on to a great career, as got a
yes.
college degree from Radcliffe, was a writer, and had an
Hmm.
extraordinary life. And Annie, so I think
Yeah,
we could salute Annie Sullivan, can't we, Robert, as a
yes, we
as a
can.
profound heroine
Yes.
that we can all
Yes.
get inspiration from. And you're absolutely right. The theme of her story is perseverance or relentlessness. You want something, you never give up. And we're striving to be the heroes of our own lives. There's the takeaway from the Annie Sullivan story, I think.
Absolutely. So this is the Hero Show. It's brought to you by Objective Standard Institute. And if you like what you're watching, please click like on YouTube or share in social media because we want to get as much out there for people to see this work that we're doing. So, Andy, how about we move on to the chronology of Anne Sullivan's life?
Yeah, born in 1866, right? I think she died in
Yes.
1936, right? She
Yeah.
was seven.
For life.
Yeah. Just to go back to Helen Keller, she's 1887 is when she goes down to Alabama to educate Helen
Right.
Keller. She's just short of her 20th birthday. She's very young herself. But what that poor girl Annie, I mean, went through in her early life,
Yes.
is just, I mean, it's just off the charts, horrifying. So she was in the poorhouse.
Starting with her parents who have to leave Ireland. The potato famine is happening in Ireland. Her parents have to get out of there to come to America. And uh, when Annie's young, she gets this eye disease and leaves her nearly blind. Her mother dies of tuberculosis when she's like 8 years old. Father abandons them. And then in this orphanage, the things that she experienced, I mean, there are dead bodies that they would leave there for over time. I mean, there was just no respect for human life. But Annie wanted to learn. She wanted to learn, and she heard about this school. Um, this is Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Mhm.
She tells the Keller family, you want, because Mr. Keller said they went to the asylum because they thought they might have to put Helen there and talk about rats and everything was just horrifying. And Annie said, yeah, you were there on visiting day. You should see what it's like, on every other day that's not visitors day. You want rats? See, my brother Jimmy and I played with rats because we had no toys. That's, we played with the rats like pets. Can you imagine? Uh, yeah, dead bodies, people with all kinds of communicable diseases, all squashed together. Because there was no other place for them. But this was the poorhouse. You know, it was just horrifying. And yeah, what did Annie do? She went on an inspection. She appealed to the inspector that she wanted to go to school. Is that right?
To the
Right.
Perkins, yeah, the Perkins School for the Blind, and they accepted her. She caught a break there, and by the time she was a voracious learner, she wanted to learn everything. And by the time she's 20, she's a class valedictorian. And shortly after that, the Mr. Keller, I'm sorry, down in Alabama, he needs help for his daughter, and because a factor in his decision was the fact that Annie was partially blind, and he thought, okay, this could help my daughter who is blind. And she comes down, as you said, March 1877. And Annie right away starts off by criticizing the family because they're in the South, deep South, and the Civil War was
Right.
not long lost. And Annie's a Northerner, and they're clashing from day one. She doesn't like slaves in the house, and they're talking as if everything wrong with the Civil War, but she's showing she's headstrong from the get go. And then, of course, that first day when they're all having the meals, that's just again seeing that there's no self-discipline for this 7-year-old girl. And she's knows what it's like to be around that kind of person, and decides, okay, I will teach by the sign language, and I will have this girl as my project. And as we said, by holding her palm and putting I just love the way the especially in the film, The Miracle Worker, the way you see that yes and no, the difference between the two, and then going from cake to milk to doll, all these things that 7-year-olds uh, really like. And by the time Keller's 9, her vocabulary is incredible. She's reading Braille. She's reading via Braille Shakespeare. She's doing mathematics. Andy, I wasn't reading Shakespeare at age 9. Helen Keller was. She had a great, yeah, she had a great teacher.
And she was very, very, very smart. Like her mother said, she was starting to speak at 6 months. At 6 months old, she was a wow, wow, wow. She was trying to mouth the word water. So, yeah, uh, and the relationship between these two women became very, very, very close. Helen called her teacher, right? That was her affectionate name for she called her
That's
teacher.
right. She called her teacher, but she was governess. She was friend. Uh, Sullivan was all these other, all these things, and they got to meet as Keller's getting older. She's turning 18, and Annie's like, "I want to bring you up north. I want to bring you to Massachusetts. You can go to Perkins. You can learn there." And then she ends up going to Radcliffe College, the female Harvard for women. She meets Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison. She doesn't have money to go to Radcliffe, so Andrew Carnegie writes a check to fund her education, and goes on and learns, starts writing books. 1893, they go to Niagara Falls, and she could feel the vibration of all the energy, all the water that's coming down, and she just gets excited about this. And then they go to the World's Fair, and by this time she's like a celebrity. The two of them are together. uh, Keller would actually be on stage, for performing, and Sullivan would be mouthing the words that Keller was trying to say. So just a beautiful relationship. Then 1905, as the relationship is progressing, Anne Sullivan actually gets married to John Albert Macy, and didn't really last that long, but he helped to get Keller published. That was one of the things that helped him in the relationship. And the two, Helen Keller and Sullivan, just continued on in their relationship with more awards and acclamation for their achievements in showing what the human mind can do. Andy, I mean, this is the main thing. What is the mind capable of, despite all this adversity that someone like Keller is putting up with?
No, absolutely right. And Helen Keller, of course, is a heroine in her own right. We're focused on Annie
Yes,
Sullivan, and
yes.
and rightfully so.
Hmm.
But Helen Keller shows the human potential. Even severely disabled, that she grows up to be a superbly educated, a successful writer. That she does a number of great things, even despite the handicaps. And it shows, even when you're limited in your direct observation of the world to exclusively the tactile form of sensation and perception. As long as you're getting input from reality, from the outer world, like you said, Robert, the human mind has the ability to develop concepts, even when limited so severely in observation. If you don't have any observational contact with the world, I imagine you cannot develop, concepts if you're completely sensory deprived. But even with just a tactile sense, Helen Keller was able to form concepts with a tremendous help from Annie Sullivan, and go on to be a successful writer and have a vast vocabulary and and extensive erudition. So you're right, Rob. It really shows the power of the human mind, and it shows the human potential, even when you're severely disabled. Look at what we're capable of doing with if we have exactly the quality that you pointed out at the outset: perseverance, relentlessness, tenacity, never that stick to itiveness, and never give up.
That's right. Never give up. Oh, and again, for the both of them, I mean, because once Keller became famous, the I wouldn't say the roles were reversed, but her star rose and Sullivan was less in the spotlight, which I think she was fine with. But there was a partnership there, and as you just said, they both persisted. They both had voracious appetites to learn. They wanted to know the world around them which they gain by integrating their sensory evidence. And Keller proved you don't need all five senses. I mean, I think that's important to know. She proved whatever senses you have in you're capable of using, you can develop them and become can read Shakespeare and can write books and can find ways to communicate.
I think the takeaway here is even when you're deprived of these two major senses, these two substantially important senses for cognition, the human mind could still get data from the world,
Yeah,
largely from the tactile,
yeah,
capacity, and still develop concepts and go on to be a brilliant, a mind of that power can develop fully. I mean, I don't know.
hmm
It's an interesting question. Could her mind have developed any further if she had those sight and hearing? I'm just guessing here. I'm guessing no. That once you're able to form concepts, then the mind, then
hmm
the mind takes over. The intellect takes over, and she has enough data from the world to do that, and goes on to this
yeah,
extraordinarily brilliant career.
yeah. Exactly, Andy. And it poses the question to me: why does this matter to us? Well, maybe sometimes we are blind to the
Yeah.
facts that are right in front of us. Maybe sometimes we don't hear all the evidence that is being presented to us, and we try to turn away from that. Not Annie Sullivan, not Helen Keller. They absolutely proved the value of this.
Especially if or when our emotions are committed to X, and the evidence shows non-X, people could be then self-inducedly blind. And yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Here's Helen, who's really, literally blind, but being objective, going by where the evidence leads us, and yeah, and Mr. Keller, in the film version of the Miracle Worker, Mr. Keller asks her what kind, because she's disciplining the child and she's rough, and he said, he asked her, do you like the child? You know, at this point, I think Andy's response would probably be no. But she said, that's not the point. Whether I like her or not, I'm going to teach her. It's not my feelings here not my feelings here that matter. It's the factual requirements of cognition that has to be the ruling concern. And Annie is tough minded in that way. Go with the data, go with the evidence, go with what the job requires and get the job done, whatever my feelings might be. And certainly she comes to love the child and Helen comes to love her as well.
Absolutely, Andy. And so my final point on this is when we talked about Helen Keller, when the family's letting her be super self-indulgent and just do whatever she wants. Do you think she had a high opinion of herself where there's no boundaries, there's no rules, reality doesn't matter, everyone around you just caters to your every whim? I don't think so. I think that is literally a childish view of life. And it's only when she was able to discover these ideas and what water is and dal and milk and all these other things, and then go on to read, that's where the self-esteem skyrockets,
Yeah,
because
no,
she can
absolutely right.
feel like I can control the events around me, even with Annie Sullivan as my eyes and ears. I'm still in control of myself, and that's a major point here, a life lesson that I see coming out of this story as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. That's a good point, Robert. The family's misguided indulgence is a form of child abuse, and Annie Sullivan points that out. You're telling her she could get away with anything that she wants to do, and that's not true. She won't be able to do that.
Causes don't have effects.
Yeah,
Hmm
exactly. Yeah, I could get away with anything. I could just act like a wild animal, and there'll be no negative consequences. And Annie Sullivan's right. You're teaching her a very bad life lesson. That's and she's got to learn this boundary. She's got to learn there's consequences to your actions. She's got to learn that there's a civilized human way of behaving yourself. And Annie's got a big job. She's got to teach that kid a lot, but she's a lot. She's woman enough for that task, and she does. It's an amazing story, everybody. Brilliantly done in The Miracle Worker. You ought to read William Gibson's play. Certainly see the movie versions on Amazon for like, $3 or $4. Amazon Prime.
I have
Um,
the link in the show description, and yeah, highly recommend. A great experience, and we just thank these two
yeah.
women for sharing their story with us a century ago, and just showing what the human potential is possible. You know what it, despite the adversity of being deaf and mute.
Yes. And I would say before we salute these two heroines and sign off, I would say if you're going to watch The Miracle Worker, make sure you got a box of Kleenex because it is if you're not crying all through the movie, then your heart must be as hard as Osama bin Laden's. But I would say thank you to both Annie Sullivan and Helen Keller. We salute you for your tremendous achievements and your heroism and the inspiration you provide for us striving to become the heroes of our own lives. And Robert and everybody out there in hero and heroine land, we'll be back next week with another episode of The Hero Show.